From the studio of Blackwater Media in the great city of Atlanta, I'm Dr. William Lester, inviting you to join me on a seasonal excursion of strangeness. Welcome to Blackwater Media's Autumn Shadows. Over the years, I've shared stories about strange experiences and bizarre encounters in a place called the Blackwater. It's a region of the Okefenokee Swamp that straddles the Georgia-Florida border. It's a strange place to say the least. It's a frightening place, and in some cases, terrifying and dangerous. I heard many creepy stories of it growing up. My mother and her people are from that area. I'm not certain, but I imagine that I still have some family living down in the isolated waterways and forgotten marshes. People I've never met, whose names I do not know. I once told the story of the Godolon, an alien anthropomorphic plant that for a time terrorized the deep reaches of the swamp. I spoke of the terrifying monstrosity known only as Crawler, an evil, vengeful thing which was summoned from its aquatic slumber by a Timucua shaman. That, in short, is where the name Blackwater Media came from. Even now, 2 decades into the 21st century, it's a foreboding place. There are still reports of strange, unknown things swimming in the water. Things that, by description, are primordial. Monsters from a prehistoric age trapped in time. Then there are the UFOs. Not just weird lights in the sky, but craft, saucers, discs that are seen regularly down there. It makes sense, though. Anyone who'd come here from 40 or 50 light years away would almost certainly want to have a look at that place. There are abandoned shacks here and there with rotted wood and rusted tin roofs. An occasional whispering about them being used for witches practicing dark magic, or as a daylight haven for vampires. The old folks down there still speak of wandering spirits that haunt the depths of the swamp, the ghosts of long-dead slaves, Creek or Seminole warriors, and inhuman specters, bestial, malevolent entities that never walk the earth in physical form. On nights of the full moon, the swamp air carries the sound of a strange howling beast that some describe as a murderous creature that seems part man and part wolf. Also, from time to time, a hunter will catch sight of a Bigfoot, which are believed to roam freely across the wide reaches of the peat-filled wetlands. The tribesmen and the old women of the villages have spoken of this creature, even before white men came. The Blackwater still holds secrets. There are some unfortunate souls who have entered and never come out. And it is for that reason, along with all of the others that I've mentioned, that you should consider that area a no man's land. A few years back, I rented an apartment from a friend of mine. He'd recently bought it and had it completely renovated. He put it up for sale but couldn't find a buyer, so I offered to rent it in the meantime. After moving in, I realized there was something wrong with the lady next door. She was about 45, but looked much older. This crazy-ass lady would sit up all night listening to Christian radio shows and talking loudly to someone. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep, So I went over to her place and asked her to keep it down. She opened her door and I got a quick peek. Her walls all had crosses painted on them in different colors, and words like Jesus and angels scribbled everywhere. The windows were painted black, letting no light in at all. And there was a damp, yellow, stained 50-year-old carpet, dog shit, and cockroaches everywhere. No dog, though. I asked her to please keep it down. She just looked at me and shut the door. And then she turned up the radio even louder. The next night I had my girlfriend staying over. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw the shadow of a person next to the bed looking at us sleeping. I thought I was hallucinating. After all, it was dark and I was tired as hell. But then the shadow started talking. It was my neighbor, this crazy, creepy-ass lady, and she was holding something in her hand. And I remember thinking, oh my fucking God. She must have broken in sometime during the night, and who knows how long she'd been standing there. You should lock your door at night, she said, and walked out. Next morning, I heard someone making strange noises below my bedroom window. And it was her. She was talking to herself in some language that I didn't recognize. She had a plastic bag in her hand. And inside that bag was the decomposed head of her dog. It was hot as hell outside, and I could smell the rotting filth in the summer air. At that point, I don't mind telling you, I was scared shitless. I thought she was obviously batshit insane. I went upstairs and knocked on another person's door and asked what the hell was going on. The guy who answered was as scared as I was. Apparently, she broke into his apartment one evening as well while he was watching TV with his kids. He got up from the couch to get a snack, only to find her behind the couch staring at him holding a goddamn power drill. And then I realized what was in her hand that night. At that stage, I was like, fuck this shit. I called the police, and they knew all about her. According to them, she was a violent schizophrenic and had not been taking her medications. But they couldn't force her or enter her apartment without her permission because she owns it. The only thing they could do was get her when she went outside. I set up for the next 2 days waiting for her to run out of cigarettes. When I heard her leave one morning at 2 a.m. to go across the road to the 7-Eleven, I called the police again. They had 3 cars and a special van over there in less than 2 minutes. They restrained her and threw her in the van and drove off to some institution, I guess. I never saw her again. I'll tell you something. There was more going on there than just a crazy lady off her meds. I had nightmares for weeks after. I saw strange shadows dashing here and there. And then I would catch that same disgusting smell of that fucking rotting dog's head. The lady may be gone, but whatever tormented and plagued her is still around. Sometimes, over the course of one's life, there exists the possibility of experiencing or encountering something beyond belief, beyond understanding, and perhaps even beyond explanation. And that experience changes a person forever. I live and work in the city of Atlanta. 7 years ago, I inherited a house and about 30 acres of property near the city of Macon, which is about 85 miles south of Atlanta. I came to decide to use the house as a retreat, a place that would serve as a getaway so that from time to time I could get out of the city to relax, unwind, and perhaps do some fishing. The house was a small but tidy, comfortable ranch style and was situated almost at the center of the property. The land itself was just west of the Ocmulgee River. East of the river lay the Ocmulgee Mounds National Historic Park. Many different native cultures had occupied the area since at least the Ice Age, and the mounds themselves had been constructed around the year 900. Within the confines of the park, there are 7 mounds. Anyway, 3 years ago, my girlfriend and I decided to spend the Labor Day weekend at the house. We both got off work early that Friday, and since we'd already gotten our things together, we got in the car, loaded cooler and all, and hit the highway. Before getting to the property, we stopped in town to do some grocery shopping for the long weekend. Primarily deli sandwiches for that night, and a big bag of charcoal, a couple of steaks and chicken wings, and a big tub of potato salad for the rest of the weekend. Anyway, we got to the house, settled in, and enjoyed sandwiches and coffee. That first night came and went as planned, and with no indication or even hint of what was to come. The next day, we visited the park to see the historic mound sites. We walked a couple of the trails, snapped some pictures, and generally soaked in the surroundings. We weren't out there that long. Middle Georgia can be quite warm in early September, and we were both looking forward to an afternoon and evening of cocktails and steaks on the grill. Later on, back at the house, I prepped the grill while my girlfriend, her name is Kelly by the way, got the steak seasoned up and ready to go. We set up a couple of tables on the patio, and after the grill was lit and the steaks were on, we lit 3 or 4 of those outdoor candles that are supposed to keep mosquitoes away, and I turned on the stereo. Anyway, the dinner was fantastic, and as afternoon grew into evening, we enjoyed the drinks and music as the sunset gently gave way to late summer darkness. It was then in full darkness that the pleasant tranquility of the night was shattered by a horrific sound coming from the surrounding woods. We just looked at each other, bewildered by the howling that cut through the air. It wasn't a coyote or dog. It was too loud and deep. And I was like, what the fuck? And just as those words came out of my mouth, Kelly came up out of her chair and pointed to the wood line slightly to our right. Now I'm going to do my best to describe to you exactly what we saw. This thing was incredibly tall with long, thin legs and arms. I'm estimating 10 to 12 feet tall. It had clawed hands and its legs were hocked out like a canine. Its head and face were also canine-like, and it was covered in what looked like badly matted dark brown or black hair. But the eyes, holy shit, the eyes were insane. They were huge, bulging, and white, and seemed like the size of softballs. It was almost as if they were too big for their sockets and were extending way out of the creature's face. It was an absolute goddamn nightmare. We watched it there at the edge of the tree line. It seemed to sway in one direction and then momentarily to the other. We could hear the sound of its shuffling feet and a low rumbling growl. It was almost as if the creature was hesitant to break the wood line, even as if it were somehow being held back or restricted from moving beyond that point. Then, as we watched, the creature ambled back, further and further until it disappeared from out of view back into the forest. A few moments after that, we heard another bone-chilling howl, the sound of which indicated that the thing was moving off in the distance. Although we stayed there for the rest of the holiday weekend, we didn't see or hear anything else that could be considered strange or even out of the ordinary. Since that time, Kelly and I have talked about it from time to time, and whenever it comes up, she refers back to our visit to the Ocmulgee Mounds. She had the idea that some way, somehow, something had been disturbed there, something that was better left undisturbed. You know what? I think she's right. And I also think that although the thing terrified us, compared to what might have happened, we got off easy.
America is on the go from Maine to the Grand Canyon with a portable radio as a traveling companion. America is on the go, Detroit to San Diego with a portable radio, a toteable, packable, portable radio.
Dear Dr. Lester, I wanted to share with you a series of encounter experiences that I had with UFOs and what I believe to be an extraterrestrial being. It was June 21st, 2017, between about 4 and 5 p.m. in Austin, Texas. I saw a fleet of strange objects floating across the sky. It was a normal, hot Texas afternoon with a few clouds in the sky. I was sitting on a chair on my balcony reading. I had a beautiful view above the trees over a green belt and had about a 180-degree view. All of a sudden I felt that I would see objects, UFOs coming into my field of vision from the right, and as they did, and I somehow knew how they would look. There were at least 30 or so by the time they stopped going by. They all moved from my right to left along the same altitude, and they made absolutely no sound. Now at first, I saw about a dozen close together. Then they started to spread out to the point where I could only see one at a time. The first one was a black Z-shaped object, followed by red, orange, yellow, and white spheres. Most of them were white spheres. Some were orange with a black outline or yellow with a red outline. A few had things like tails hanging down from them. Now, before I saw the first dozen, I felt something very unusual happen to me in addition to the knowledge of them coming. I also felt a strange and intense pressure in my brain which hurt and terrified me to the point that I was shaking all over. I could almost not even stand up and walk, so I was not able to get my phone to record, but I did stand up and hold on to the balcony railing. When I did see them, I somehow knew they were doing this to me. I knew they were making my head feel weird, and I thought they were communicating with me in some kind of weird psychic or even telepathic way. I actually thought that I was losing my mind, going crazy. I felt insane and was afraid that I would end up psychotic. UFOs went by for about 30 minutes, and I knew when each one was coming and which one was the last one. I was sure that these UFOs and my strange feelings were just a sign that I'd lost my mind. After the last of the UFOs went by, I began to feel better. The pressure and the strange feelings in my head went away, but I was still very afraid. I immediately wrote about what happened. I felt like I should report what I saw, and I checked the news because it was broad daylight near heavy traffic on a weekday. If I'd seen them, wouldn't most of the city have also been able to see them? But there was nothing on the news, and I didn't know what to do. I looked for websites where people report UFO sightings, but I didn't end up making any kind of report. I think that's because I was so terrified and overwhelmed. For the next few days, I saw more UFOs in the same way, but only a few at a time, and also knew when they were coming and from where. Once I even saw the black Z-shaped UFO through the wall and ceiling somehow. I know that to a lot of you that doesn't make any sense, but that's what happened. For the next few months, I continued to see them, but less and less, and with less and less intensity of pressure in my head. Now, I should tell you, I've always had insomnia, so I slept with blackout curtains over the bedroom windows. And over the next few weeks after the first sighting, I felt like I heard something in my room at night, but just told myself it was raccoons or opossums, squirrels, or other rodents in the attic. Strangely, I also noticed what looked like balls of lint near my pillow. At first, I thought it was just lint from the dryer or from the air vents. They looked like lint from the dryer that somehow rolled into little balls of varying sizes. I finally started sleeping with the blackout curtains open because I kept hearing something which was in the room, not in the attic, and became more and more frightened. One night, I woke up and felt a presence to my left, and although it was dark, there was enough light for me to see what looked like a giant humanoid-looking praying mantis thing just standing there staring at me. I thought to myself, what the fuck is happening? I could hear it breathing, but for some reason, I didn't feel threatened or afraid. It almost felt protective, but I also felt like maybe it was controlling me, controlling how I felt about it, like maybe it made me feel like it wasn't a threat. I didn't know how to feel about it, but it did scare the hell out of me. Thankfully, I never saw it again. For a long time, I didn't know what to do, and I felt like I couldn't tell anyone. I finally chose not to live in fear, and so I decided to move on and move out. You know, people have always wondered whether or not we're alone in the universe, and if we're not alone, where are the aliens? Well, I can tell you from firsthand experience. They're here. I live in northern Minnesota with my older cousin on the Red Lake Native American Reservation. Every day we would go on walks along different trails through the woods that we would come across. Each day we would go a little further than the last, just talking or practicing our singing voices. But after what happened, we don't go deep into the woods anymore. There was this one particular trail I liked taking because it led to this very old building made of stones. We would go inside to check out what looked like, in my opinion, an old torture chamber or jail of some kind. As we left the stone building, the sun was starting to go down. We got halfway through the trail back home. Keep in mind, the trail is at least 2.5 miles long, and my cousin got the brilliant idea of camping out at the building. I, of course, replied without hesitation, "Oh, hell no. But you can do whatever you want." Then he said, "Fine. All right, stay here like a little bitch." When we got to the house, he grabbed his camping supplies and walked into the woods without saying a word. After a few hours passed, at about 2:30 a.m., I became scared of being alone in the house. When I would go to the bathroom, I would walk slowly against the wall down the hall, looking back every 5 seconds, and then quickly went in and shut the door. So I had no idea what was going on in my head, but I ended up going down the trail at 3 in the damn morning, walking as fast as I could with my flashlight in my hand. I couldn't keep it steady. And then I got, I'd say about 3/4 down the trail, still walking fast and not looking back for anything. And then I heard some sticks crack on my left. I was shocked and couldn't move. I turned off my flashlight because I thought it was a bear and kept as quiet as I could. And I thought to myself, oh shit. Then I heard this odd flute music in the distance. That's right, a flute. And I thought to myself, what the fuck was going on out here? I was terrified, but there was this feeling I got that made me go toward it. I got closer and closer as the music got louder, but I think I blacked out from shock. Now here it gets even more crazy. I woke up on the ground right next to a small, shadowy man sitting on a stump facing away from me playing his flute. I was so goddamn scared that I couldn't move, and at the same time, controlled by the beautiful harmony its flute of some sort was creating. I thought in my head, all right, 3, 2, 1, and I got up slowly, trying not to make any sudden noises. As it hopped quickly on its feet and turned at me, I saw it. It looked as if it were made from the wood of a fallen tree branch and had black beady eyes that looked almost see-through or transparent. It's hard to explain. It said something, but I couldn't understand what it was. It really sounded like it was talking backwards as it walked closer and closer. I took off and ran as fast as I could down the trail. I started seeing a fire, so I ran even faster toward it and got to my cousin, who of course did not believe me. So we sat at the fire for a while until we eventually went inside the building. I fell asleep in a heartbeat due to all the running I did until my cousin woke me up with a look of fear in his face that I've never seen before. He told me to stay quiet, and we looked out a barred window of the building at a tree that was 6 feet away, and there were 5 of these same little people I'd seen earlier. Then he said, "Watch this." They were doing this all night as they danced around the tree with the same flute music. He threw a rock at a nearby tree and they all ran into a hole on the side of the tree. We looked at the hole afterwards and saw nothing but a dead end 5 inches into the tree. Later on, I asked an older woman who lived in the area about this, and she told me I should have appreciated the music. And now I hear the same flute music starting at 3 a.m. in the morning, every day, whether I'm asleep or not. Now, I'm a First Nations person from a reservation in Canada. I grew up in different reserves with different family members. We all have a common belief. If something otherworldly is bothering you, then someone is inviting it in. We believe that these negative powers are always seeking a way to influence people. Anyhow, this happened when I was about 7 years old. My sister and I were visiting our grandparents' house. The adults decided to go to bingo, and they got the eldest cousin to babysit everyone. His name was Corey, who was at the time 16. Now, my grandparents' home has a few trees around the property that they planted, and outside of that is a mile of straight field that they use for farming. We were outside all day there. My cousin Corey was sitting on the patio as we were all jumping on the trampoline and he was watching us. I went inside, and when I came back out, I jumped up on the edge of the patio to jump off onto the trampoline. My sister, who was 5 at the time, and my other cousin, who was also 5, were already on the trampoline, and they stood in my way. Now, I kept telling them to move, and as I was about to jump, I noticed that they were completely fixated on the field. So I looked towards the field too. There were 2 strange figures coming towards our location. The field is about a mile long, like I said, but you could see 2 huge black things kind of hopping, coming down the field. They would come up and then down, like a snake taking a peek, and their movement was in perfect unison. I called out to Corey and pointed towards the field, and he told us all to get inside the house and lock up because he didn't know what the hell they were. So we did as we were told. I don't remember much after going in, but it was like I just came out of a trance and started crying. My sister was beside me crying, and my other cousin Charlene, who was about 11 at that time, was also crying, holding my little cousin Cass. I got up to go to the front door, and Corey was running back in. He said those things were circling the house, and he was trying to run across the road to the neighbors. Now, for whatever reason, the phone had just stopped working, and it was just a bunch of kids in a house. I went back to the couch to sit with my sister so we could comfort each other. When I got to her, she told me to look at the window, so I did. And those things were looking in. They had their hands against the window as they peeked in. Now here's the crazy shit. They looked like crocodiles, but also strangely human. I mean, they didn't have the extended snout of a crocodile. They had 5 fingers, but they weren't human fingers. They had long nails with crocodile-like skin and walked standing upright. They had like this long black cloak or something on. So they stood at the window for only a few seconds and took off. Now, soon after that, our grandparents got home with my uncle. We all went running to them crying, telling them what had happened. My grandparents were very traditional and told us that they had to leave and needed us to go to my aunt's on another reserve. My aunt came to get us not long later, and my uncle was upset. He drove all around that field looking for whatever those things were. But when we jumped into my aunt's old van to go to her house, we saw those things behind our grandparents' house running south. You know, at one point, I tried to convince myself that the whole damn experience was just a dream. But I was just bullshitting myself. Over the years, I would bring it up at family gatherings, and everyone who was there at the time would recall the events of that terrifying night.
Your mouth tells you Brim is coffee, good rich coffee it will say. But your head will tell you different, 'cause the caffeine's gone away. Yes, your mouth tells you Brim is coffee, good rich coffee it will say. But your head will tell you different, 'cause the caffeine's gone away.
Introducing Brim, the coffee made from coffee-soaked coffee beans. It's brimming with flavor to make your mouth feel good, and no caffeine to keep the rest of you feeling good. New Brim decaffeinated coffee from General Foods, freeze-dried or ground.
Yes, your head will tell you different, 'cause the caffeine's gone away.
In 2016, I was visiting some relatives in Maryland. Every so often I'd stop by and just relax with them. Where they live was somewhat suburban with forest land towards the back of their property. It was a fairly large wooded area, but I never really paid much attention to it. I said all that to give a picture of my surroundings on this particular night. It had to be between 11:30 and midnight. Anyway, we were talking when a strange feeling came over me, as though something bad was about to happen. I got up off the porch and began to scan the street. My cousins all the while talking, when I saw a creature that resembled a deer walk out onto the street. It was four-legged with way more muscle mass than any buck I ever seen. Its head was huge and fit its massive body. Height-wise, I'd say it was about 6.5 feet, maybe more. Its antlers were the strangest part to me, though. I mean, they were wide, way more so than I thought they should be. But they didn't really stick up like a regular deer. They curved and bent into 3 intricately grown stacks on top of each other. It was weird. It gave me the impression that it was some ancient beast that roamed the woods for hundreds of years. It was like this thing shouldn't even have existed. It didn't even have that timid, skittish walk like you see from most deer. It walked as though it was royalty and dared anyone to challenge it. It stopped in the middle of the street and just stared at me. So we both stood looking at each other for about 20 seconds or so. And it was as if it wanted me to know that it was there. Then, just as calm as it walked out, it turned and walked back to the direction it came. Now, of course, my cousins were too busy running their mouths to get off the porch and see it. So I'm the only one that got a good look at it. And when I tried to tell one of them, their drunk asses just said it was an old buck. Now, I'm by no means an outdoors man, but I've seen older bucks with gray hairs and huge antlers, and that thing was nothing like them. When I told an old coworker of mine from South America who's had encounters with the paranormal, she told me that the devil had decided to show himself to me that night. So that's my whole story from that night. I shared it because, in all honesty, I wish I knew what the hell that thing was. And hopefully, it wasn't the devil. But the way that year was for me, it might well have been. I've listened to some of the stories on Blackwater Media about people who've had sightings of unknown creatures. After having a similarly unsettling experience, I thought I'd share my story. I really enjoy horseback riding. It's a fantastic way to enjoy the great outdoors and experience all that nature has to offer. But it can also lead you into an encounter with the strange and the bizarre. That's what happened to me recently on a riding trail in Tennessee. It was a clear sunny day with a few very high clouds. After having gone down the trail for about 15 minutes, I caught sight of what seemed to be a silhouette in the distance. But then something else caught my attention. I could hear the sound of wings flapping. Whatever it was that I was seeing seemed to have a tail. Then it flew in a diagonal line right over my head. It was close, maybe 15 to 20 feet. It was so close, in fact, that I could see the veins and little claws on its wings. It was about the same size as the average house cat. Another thing that I thought was weird was that it didn't have any feathers at all. It was all black and had a long, skinny, tapered tail that ended in a bulb. It had a long, pointed face, but I don't think it had a beak. The back of its head was raised, but I couldn't really see its back. It had 2 folded up hind legs with claws and a bony protrusion in its chest. And it was fast and had a different flight pattern than a bird. Now this thing would do a couple of upward flaps and then just glide. It's hard to explain, but I got a good look at the creature, and I'm telling you, it was nothing I've ever seen on National Geographic. When I got back home, I spent about an hour trying to draw exactly what I saw. Then I looked online. Since the thing looked kind of prehistoric, I started searching around Google to see if I could find anything similar. Of course, what came up most often were pterosaurs, and the creature had some similarities to that, but still it was different. Like I said before, it didn't have a beak at all. And all of the different pterosaurs that I found on the internet had well-defined beaks. I started thinking that maybe there was some kind of prehistoric flying animals that we just don't know about yet. Also, the more I thought about how the creature actually looked, the more I realized that it was really more dragon-like than anything else. A little dragon gliding around the woods in Tennessee, flitting from branch to branch. It sounds crazy, I know, but that's exactly what I saw. It's really something to think about. It also makes me wonder what else is out there. About 12 years ago, I was working swing shifts in South Central Alaska, leaving work for the 70-plus mile trip home around midnight each night. Part of the commute included a narrow, twisty road with dense woods on either side. The night in question was around mid-October, getting close to Halloween, but far too early for people to be dressing up in costumes. I was heading down the narrow, twisty road around 1 a.m., pitch black out except for my not-so-good headlights. Coming around a corner, I was startled to see what at first I thought was a man standing on the edge of the road. Instinctively, I hit the brakes, slowing down to maybe 10 miles an hour, intending to stop and ask the guy if he needed help. But I quickly realized that it was not a man. He was standing upright but shaped wrong. The shoulders were too large and hunched. The head and neck were too far forward. The face, which wasn't looking at me at first but towards the trees on the other side of the road, had a suggestion of a muzzle. There were ragged, uneven spikes running down its back. Once fully in the headlights, it was clear the thing was black and looked sort of scaly. Next to it on the ground was what looked like some kind of dead animal. A sheep, goat, or something. As my brain absorbed all of this in the space of about 10 seconds, I assumed it was some sort of well-done Halloween gimmick, though why it was placed out in the middle of nowhere at midnight was beyond me. I had now slowed down to about 5 miles an hour and was nearly alongside it. Then it turned its head towards me. Oh my God. The way it moved and the eye shine reflected in its eyes, I knew that I was looking at something, well, the best word I can use here is monstrous. Although it was dark, I got a good look at it. And this goddamn thing looked reptilian, and its eyes were slitted and hot yellow. The spikes on its back made it seem almost prehistoric. Anyway, I have no problem saying that I was scared shitless and I slammed on the gas, almost going into the ditch. I tore ass down the highway all the way home, and I avoided that section of road at night for years after. It occurred to me later that it looked a lot like the creatures in that 70s movie, Gargoyles. You know, the one with Cornel Wilde? Now look, I'm not trying to say that that's what it actually was. I mean, maybe it was. Or maybe a chupacabra or some kind of damn alien thing. Shit, I don't know. But I do know 100% that it was real. It was some kind of damn monster, and I never want to see anything remotely similar to it. Ever. There's some dark, crazy shit out there in this world. Hiding in the shadows, waiting for the sun to go down, and making you dread the moment when the clock strikes midnight. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, I used to target practice in the sand and gravel pits and mountains around Sultan, Washington. Back in the summer of '82, I was target practicing one day and had an unusual encounter in one of those sand pits. I had a 3x12 powered scope on a 30-06 with me on that day and was going through about 100 rounds practicing shooting with both eyes open. I just replaced an empty clip with a new one. I took one shot out of the new clip and then noticed some movement out of the corner of my eye. I scoped in on the movement and saw what looked like a large, hairy humanoid. The hair was just a shade darker than golden brown, and I could see the body from about the waist up. It was standing at the top of the sand pit to the left of where I was targeting, calmly watching me. At first, I thought someone put up a cardboard cutout up there, and I scoped it out to see what I was actually seeing. While I was looking at it through my scope at a range of about 75 to 100 feet away, it blinked. And my first thought, it's a goddamn Bigfoot. You have to remember, in this part of the country, we're all familiar with stories of sightings and encounters with this creature. I even remembered at the time that someone told me that there was $1 million bounty on one of these things. And I decided maybe I should cash in on that. But instead of pulling the trigger, I stared for maybe 35 seconds or so and then put the rifle down. It seemed as though I had tunnel vision, and I continued to watch this thing until it stepped backwards into the trees and vanished. Then I grabbed my rifle and ran for the spot that it had been standing in. When I got there, I started looking for some kind of evidence. Nothing. No footprints, no hair, no funny smells, no evidence of any type. I searched for about 20 or 30 minutes. Now, I measured a tree standing next to where the Sasquatch had been, and I had to hold the rifle by the butt and extend my arms as high as I could to reach the point on the tree that had been next to the head of the creature. And it was 8 feet tall, give or take an inch. I double-checked the measurement with tape I had back in the car. I always keep tools in the trunk. After I realized what I almost did, I got scared. What if I'd shot the creature? What if it had attacked? A little voice inside my head told me that I'd been really lucky, that aside from the sighting itself, the entire incident had unfolded peacefully. But shit, I decided to leave and headed straight back to Seattle. As for what happened that day, there's really no way to spin it. Bigfoot exists. I had a face-to-face encounter with one, and if that's what it takes to make you accept the reality of these creatures, you're better off thinking that it's all just a myth. This incident, which I'd like to share with you, happened when I was about 15. I hope that after you hear and understand what happened to me, that you never, ever consider using a Ouija board. And if you have used one, don't ever use it again. At the time, several strange things were happening, which I believe had to do with a seance my friend and I put on. We were using a homemade Ouija board made from a piece of scrap plywood, those big stinky magic markers, and a glass from the kitchen for a planchette. Nothing much exciting happened during the seance, and to be honest, I thought my friend was pushing the glass and never thought much of it. That is, until I began waking up at 3:15 a.m. every morning with a genuine sensation of total terror. I would lie awake in my bed with the covers over my head as I had a strange sensation of being watched and was afraid of what was in the room with me. I would lie there until the sun came up. I was always terrified of looking in a certain direction, and upon inspection, I found the glass which had been used in the damn seance. This took me by surprise as the glass had been disposed of, so I was certain that the glass was the reason for my sleepless nights. I got rid of the glass again. However, I kept experiencing the same feelings, and once again, upon inspection, came across the same glass that I'd already thrown in the garbage twice. What the fuck was going on with this damn glass? This time I was determined to get rid of it, so I took it outside and smashed it on the ground. I continued waking at 3:15 a.m. to the minute every morning without fail, and I started seeing strange, dark shadows. The shadows started as perfect black balls which would circle my room, then seemed to disappear through my window. Now, believe it or not, I put this off to paranoia and lack of sleep and simply tried to ignore it and went back to sleep, still with my head under the covers, of course. Then other people started noticing the shadow too, and I mean during the daytime. They would tell me towards the end of the house where my room was seemed a bit creepy. Gradually, the shadows seemed to get bigger, but I continued to ignore them. Until one night, the family dog woke me up again, 3:15 a.m. He was sitting next to my bed and he was making a crying sound. I figured the dog needed to go out, so I got up and let him outside. As soon as I was back in bed, the dog was at my window, squeaking and carrying on, so I got back up and let him back inside. The dog followed me to my room and once again sat by my bed whimpering. Then I took him back outside, and even though he sat at my window still crying, I made him stay out there for a bit because I didn't want him coming back in and waking me up. Now, I eventually gave in and let the dog back inside. The bathroom light was on, letting light flood the hallway as I walked back to my room, where the dog started growling. I moved closer to the bathroom door so the dog could see it was me, as I was worried he was growling at my shadow. I called him up to me and he was still growling, and I said, "Hey, it's only me. Come here. What's the matter?" The dog walked slowly towards me, still growling, and sat next to my leg, growling at something that he perceived to be behind me. In that moment, my thoughts turned to, "Oh shit, there's somebody in the house." And I turned around and started running down the hallway. What I saw has never left my mind, and something no one has ever believed when I've told them. I saw what seemed to be like a huge bird. It had huge outstretched wings that would have touched the roof and almost to the floor. Its body ended where the wings did, and neither seemed to touch the floor. As it followed me down the hallway, the wings stayed outstretched and it seemed to glide as it moved. I did notice a small head between the wings, but no features that I can recall, and the head seemed hooded rather than round and connected to the body without a neck. To me, the creature seemed more shadow-like than of flesh. I tried to momentarily bullshit myself and attribute it to my own shadow, but it wasn't. It was real. I remember mostly the wings and the enormity of them as they towered over me and how it moved as it followed after me until it slipped into another room. I'm not sure what happened to it after that, but my sister, who was older and didn't believe in anything paranormal, had some scary experiences involving a black shadow that would terrorize her at night. Let me bottom line this for you. There are evil, malicious spirits that will absolutely exploit human arrogance and stupidity. Never try to conjure spirits. It won't go well for you. And I don't give a shit what anybody tells you about surrounding yourself with white light, burning sage, salt on the floor, whatever. That's all paranormal TV show, psychic fair bullshit. Demons operate on a whole nother level. Think about that before you sit down and try to use a Ouija board.
Not so many years ago, tomato soup and cream of tomato were unusual dishes, enjoyed very much, but not very often. Today, of all the soups in the world, tomato soup is the one most often served. Not because women have taken to making tomato soup frequently. No, on the contrary, few housewives ever attempt it anymore. There's just one reason for tomato soup's popularity, and it is this: the magic, matchless flavor of Campbell's tomato soup. There's a lively verve, a dashing zest about this flavor that people take to at once and come back to and enjoy again and again. The first racy taste of it has a way of arousing a desire to eat, and yet there's a pleasant feeling of satisfaction when the last spoonful is gone. So this soup is a happy choice for the main dish at lunchtime or at supper, and it also is a fine way to start the day's main meal. Serve it sometimes, too, as cream of tomato, made with milk instead of water. You can always be sure that it will be received with pleasure, because this, of all soups, is the one people like to have most often: Campbell's tomato soup.
You're listening to the Blackwater Media Radio Network, the finest in digital audio entertainment. This is Blackwater Media coming to you from the great city of Atlanta. In 2011, I was working at the Lewis McChord military base located south of Tacoma, Washington. I was employed at Public Works and assigned to the Environmental Department. I was part of a group conducting a study in the southern section of the base. There were several soldiers attached to the group for security. Now, we'd been out in the field all day and were getting ready to head back to the lab. About 5:30 p.m., we heard a distress call on the radio from one of the security attachments located north of our location. Then we heard gunshots coming from the same direction. The best I can describe the situation is that all hell broke loose. The civilians were hustled out of the area immediately. When we arrived at the lab, we were told by command that our department would be non-active until further notice. Next day, I received a phone call at home from a lady I worked with. Of course, she was wondering if I'd heard anything. I told her no one contacted me, but I was having dinner later with friends who worked on the base. She seemed very concerned because no one was answering calls at the base. That evening, I got together with friends who worked in other public works departments at the base. At that time, there was no official information available, but there were lots of rumors floating around. The most prevalent rumor was that one of the security detail went off his rocker and started shooting at other personnel. We were all called back to work about a week later. We each were given a written statement that, despite the rumors, the incident was a false alarm and that no one had discharged their firearm. We all rolled our eyes. This was pure, deep, creamy bullshit. Each of us had heard the gunshots and realized that the situation was more serious than what the military was stating. A month or so later, I was collecting samples in the field and was accompanied by 2 soldiers for security. We were back in the general area of the mysterious incident. One of the soldiers mentioned that all of the security people who were on duty that particular day were no longer with the division, which I thought was very odd. I asked if he'd heard anything about the incident. With a straight face, he said that something was shot after it scared a group of soldiers. I mentioned that I thought soldiers were not authorized to shoot at wildlife. Both the soldiers laughed and agreed with my comment. I asked, "What the hell's so funny?" They explained that they were never told what that something was, but there had been unconfirmed sightings of Sasquatch and other unknown man-like creatures in and around the base. Now, this information didn't really surprise me since I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and was well aware of the legend. That's all I can really tell you. I no longer work at Lewis McChord, but still have several friends who do. I will say that I'm more mindful of the cryptid world, especially here in the Pacific Northwest. I believe that the government and military are very familiar with these creatures. The sudden security boost during the incident, and then the fact that the biological and medical departments on the base were put on hiatus, leads me to believe that the military was in possession of one of these creatures. I have no confirmation of this, but my gut feeling indicates that that's exactly what happened. My encounter happened a few years ago, but still bothers me. And I've never been able to come up with a clear answer as to what it was, other than a monster. I was living in a super small town near Rochester, New York. I'm talking 302 people small. And between you and me, the whole place was extremely weird. Strange lights in the sky, abandoned farmhouses that were said to be haunted, phantom hitchhikers, the whole 9 yards. I mean, the whole area was like a goddamn nexus of high strangeness. You'll see what I mean. It was early fall and my sister was going to college nearby, and my mom and I would pick her up every night. It was maybe 8 p.m. when we were pulling out of the driveway. That's when we both saw it. It was so thin I could see its ribs. Its skin was a weird shade of light gray. Its chest looked human. The anatomy was right, collarbones, ribs. It even had nipples on its chest. But the rest of it didn't look human at all. Its legs were the weirdest. It kind of glided across the ground. Yeah, it looked like that. Its actual movements were also weird. You know how dogs have that extra joint in their legs? It had that. But moving on 2 legs, it didn't even run like a dog does. It ran like a person, but with dog legs, if that makes sense. It was small, probably 3 feet. I couldn't help but notice that it had no genitalia, which seemed really weird to me if this was some sort of unknown species. I remember looking at its face, and I remember it looking at me. I remember our eyes meeting. I can never forget that goddamn face. The wide eyes with slits like a cat or a lizard. The way it bared its teeth, as if it was trying to scare the shit out of us. And you know what? If that's what it was trying to do, it worked. My mom stopped the car just as it ran into the brush. She'd seen it too. We were both too scared to get out and look for it, but we both saw it. My mom described it almost the exact same way I did, although she says she felt overwhelming fear as soon as she saw it. And just like me, she felt like we were seeing something that we weren't supposed to see. Now, she believes it was a demon, but I don't think it was. It doesn't even seem to match up with what I've heard of demons. But I understand that there's plenty of people out there who, when faced with the inexplicable or the frightening, immediately attribute it to the devil. I've told this story before, and some people have suggested it might have been something like a skinwalker. And after a little bit of research, I don't think that adds up either. For a long time, I thought it was an alien. I don't think I believe that anymore either. Bottom line is, it was a real flesh and blood monster in our driveway that night. And I have no idea just what the hell it was. Now, if you're listening to this, and you've seen something like this, or know of anything like this, please tell me. Just thinking about whatever that damn thing was gives me nightmares. Up until the age of 14, I lived in Michigan. I lived in the St. Joseph area, if anyone's familiar with it. Anyway, my grandparents lived in the northern areas of Michigan. We would regularly make the 4 or 5 hour drive and go visit them either on the way to our lake house, which was a little further north, or just to see them. They lived in the middle of nowhere. You know, one of those 25 minutes to town sort of things. Both of their neighbors were a mile in each direction, and their property is huge. They lived in a small trailer in the middle of the property. They had 2 pastures to each side of the property, and in the back, they had miles of trails that would take you through the woods. My grandfather usually used this for hunting. Anyway, I was hitting golf balls from the front of the house into the pasture. I hit all my balls and went to go collect them. I opened the gate and shut it behind me so none of the dogs could get through, and I walked around picking up balls. A couple of them went further than normal, so I had to walk back behind the pasture area and into the woods. As I was walking, I could hear leaves being crunched, but they were a little off from my steps. I kept hearing this weird noise coming from behind me, kind of like a watery sound. But it was like someone just got out of the shower and they were dripping wet. But this noise kept stopping and starting, so I just thought it was the wind blowing water out of the trees. I found my last ball and turned around to start walking back, and I saw a tall form move behind a tree. I could tell it was taller than me, but didn't really know what it was. Now, being from Michigan, we've got our fair share of scary animals that would love to take a bite out of your ass, but this was definitely not a wolf and could not have been a bear. So I just kind of stood there frozen, just looking at the tree and bushes this thing was near. And after a while, it started to emerge. It crawled out on its hands and legs first. It had these crazy skinny arms which were followed by its head. It looked up and around and finally looked at me. It crawled the rest of the way out, and I could see the whole thing. Like I said, it had skinny arms like it hadn't eaten in a while. Dark looking skin that had a shine to it like it was slimy almost. The body was just like a mass of flesh. It didn't even look to have a stomach or chest. It was just kind of twisted up and deformed. Its legs were just as long and fucked up looking as its arms, and both the thing's feet and hands were elongated. Not massively or anything, but you could damn sure tell it was longer than your average foot or hand. Its head was the part I have a really hard time pinpointing down. It had eyes, no hair, a long mouth that wouldn't open. Its nose was just 2 holes, and it had a very long exaggerated chin, but in another kind of way it looked normal. It stared at me and without opening its mouth made sounds that I've been hearing, which seemed to be made by its nose as its nostrils flared. It started to walk around. Not in my direction, but just around where it was. Then it stood up on 2 legs. It was probably 6.5 feet tall, but its look and appearance made it look a hell of a lot scarier. The thing moved its neck in an unnatural way, and then it looked at me. It was only about 25 yards away, way too close for comfort, but I was not about to move and have this creature charge me. And then, all of a sudden, the damn thing bolts right at me. I opened my eyes wide and just prepared myself, but it ran right by me and through the woods. I turned around to make sure, and it just kept running, sometimes on all 4s, sometimes on 2 legs. Its gait both ways was unnatural. Its body contorted and just looked off. I ran my ass out of that pasture, shut the gate behind me, and didn't look back. I didn't tell my grandparents right away, but a couple of months later I told them. This was the summer of 1975. I didn't tell them until about the fall of that year. My grandfather pulled me aside after I told him and asked me what it looked like exactly. I told him, and he said he'd seen it before out on the trails. He didn't say any more about it, but he told me not to be worried. Now, I haven't really told anyone but family and close friends about this, but I guess that's all changed now. This really messed me up for a while. The scary thing, too, is that I saw it later on, several times, different places, never at my home, but in places up north, even at the lake cabin about an hour away from my grandparents. I have no idea what the damn thing was. And the truth is, I don't really think I want to know. Back in 1981, I was working for a contractor as a masonry apprentice after leaving trade school. That summer, we were working at Mystic Caverns in northern Arkansas. We were upgrading tour trails in the caves. It was a Friday and getting close to quitting time, so me and another guy had to go through the work area and make sure that all the tools were collected and that the safety barriers were in place. We weren't working during the weekend, so the work area had to be tightened up before we left. The guy who was with me had to leave. I forgot why, so I was down there by myself for a while. I was almost finished loading the cart when I heard faint pounding sounds coming from deeper in the cavern. I thought that maybe one of the crew may still be in the cave, so I yelled out. The banging stopped and it was quiet. Then I started to hear slapping sounds for a few seconds, then it got quiet again. I yelled out again. No response. So I figured it was cave critters, maybe even bats. I started to make my way out. Now there was an area that I came upon where on the right of the railing it dropped off into a depression. There was some lighting, but it was difficult to see to the bottom of the depression. As I passed by, I heard splashing sounds coming from the depression. I stopped, and I got a glimpse of something on two legs walking in the water below. Further away, there was a section of the cave that opened up and was well lit. As I watched, the splashing continued. Then I saw the thing moving out of the shadows and moving away from me. Now, the only way I can describe this thing is that it was something walking on two legs with large frog-like feet. It was about 5 feet tall and was dark grayish green. The head was large, rounded. It only turned around slightly, so I couldn't see much detail in the face. The body was thick in the chest but narrow at the waist and hips. It bent at the knees when it stepped and had shiny skin resembling a frog, and I didn't notice any hair. I didn't hear any vocals, just the splashing as it moved away from me. I'd estimate that it was 70 so feet away from me when I first got a good look at it. I wasn't scared, just stunned. I grabbed the cart and quickly made my way towards the entrance. When we came back to work that next Monday, I didn't mention anything to anyone. I kept a sharp watch for anything out of the ordinary. The job lasted a few more weeks, and luckily, nothing else out of the ordinary occurred. A few weeks after that, I found out that one of my girlfriend's cousins worked at the caverns. He replaced lighting and did other odds and ends, so he was in the cavern a lot. When I got the chance to meet him, I asked if he'd ever seen something weird in the cave. He said that he hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary. I told him I was just wondering. I didn't want to alarm him with details of what I saw.